Digitalk. So I got an email yesterday, and Gargana asked, any special effects in your presentation? And I said, usually I ride it on a unicorn. And then I have elves and dwarves feed the unicorn while I speak. And then I thought, well, I've never been here, so maybe it's not totally appropriate to ask for a unicorn the first time you show up. And I was trying to figure out, is this a common thing here? And I Googled, and I found it's not very common to have unicorns in Bulgaria. Outside of food, maybe. So I thought, let's go a bit more humble, and because we are like pop culture, I asked for a dragon. They didn't have dragons either. So I said, well, if I can't have a unicorn, and if I can't have a dragon, I'll just do a very boring corporate presentation. That's what I do all the time. So welcome to Reimagining a Giant, the 124-year-old startup. My name is Tim Steigert. I'm on Twitter as well. I lead change and innovation for a company that does a lot of stuff in healthcare. We produce about 25% of the world's energy, and it's largely diversified. So thanks to Alex, wherever you are, for mentioning GE and the 160 strategies that we have. I run a few of those, not all, that would be taking too much time. So with that, let's get started with a really boring corporate presentation. This is Comic Sans font type 8, and it's Times New Roman in the header. That's a tip I was given last night at the gallery at the speakers dinner. That's how you should do it. So, yeah, maybe the guy didn't really mean it. Wherever you are, I'll come find you. Anyways, what we will do is we'll understand what's happening in the world around you. You need then to decide what you think is kind of a right thing to do, and then you have people do that, because you certainly don't want to do it yourself, because that would be dangerous, and dangerous and you don't want to do it. And, that's the presentation. It's a boring corporate presentation. Now, after the elves and the dwarves and the unicorns and the dragons and everything else, I was thinking, maybe we can talk about this, but move it into a context that some of you might be a little more familiar with than the corporate world. Is this, as you can tell from the visual impression, is not a corporate event. So let's choose a slightly different context and use a story to tell the story of how to reinvent a giant. You know this story. The Lord of the Rings. So we'll use the Lord of the Rings to talk about GE, which has never been done before. Let's get started. And we all know where Lord of the Rings starts out. Anyone not seen the movie? I'll quickly walk through what is it now. I'm glad you've seen it. I've tried this with Wolf of Wall Street before, and people were like, what's that movie all about? So we start at the Shire. And at the Shire, everything is merry and happy, and people have certain behaviors. The behaviors, hobbits or humans, because really we're talking about humans, have four predominant behaviors, things that people do. They like to move. We've done that. And they like to sleep, which is also very human. That's what you usually do in corporate presentations. People like to communicate. That's why we have a Twitter wall up on the side. It'll be back in a second. And people like to consume, because y'all need to drive a little bit on consumption. That has been human behavior ever since, Homo erectus walked on Earth. For the past 25,000 years, this has been very predominant human behavior. Stone Age, you can imagine that. You're moving around, you're spotting, while you move that you want to eat, you go, communicate to your neighbor, you hunt it, you eat it, and you sleep. Very classic human behavior. Now, meanwhile, right around the corner from the Shire, the situation looks a little different. And we all know that there's this guy who is was running the shop over there, this guy. Oh, you can't see him. It's kind of bad in contrast. That's supposed to be Sauron, who is holding the ring. So he's kind of the CEO of this place, right, with the eye that you would have seen before. And it's kind of weird. And of course, that's all a story, and that's not true. So if you want to understand how that relates to the real world, Here is the real world Sauron. Now, by the number of laughs I'm not getting, I can gauge the number of economists in the room. I put the name next to it so you can like really quickly Google it. That's Frederick Winslow Taylor. He's supposed to be the father of the Industrial Revolution. And with the Industrial Revolution, people slightly changed these behaviors. So move, sleep, communicate, consume changed into different types of behaviors where people all of a sudden were looking for no longer move around freely. We want you to come to the factory. We don't want you to sleep. This is all about labor, right? Come here and work in the factory. It's not so much about communication, it's about being really, really effective, bringing in the effort and making it happen. That is what is important. And consumption, yeah, consumption is kind of difficult if you're really busy working. So the human response to that? Laziness. Which causes the advent of a total new science. Any guesses? Right. Management. That has been true in human organizations for the past 150 years. Ever since the advent of the Industrial Revolution, that has been human behavior. Now, what it takes is to understand the principles. What the companies are doing, they're driving business outcomes and they're managing that at, manageable speed. Let's not go too fast. Not a little change, yeah, but not too much. Keep things stable, right? We've done that before, we've never done that before. We don't need to do that, it's not important. And we really understand cost. That is the drivers and the principles of the Industrial Revolution. Now what it needs a fellowship to change that. It needs a couple of crazy ones that set out to change how things are done. And inspiration is coming from the tall, white-haired guy in the movie, right? Gandalf, well, almost. That's our Gandalf, that's Jeff Immelt, the CEO of GE. And if he casts a magic spell, it looks something like this. The colors actually work quite nicely. I'm tired of hearing 5-year plans, which is somewhat wicked because, long-term planning, that's what you live and breathe. So understanding the word, which was the first bullet in small Comic Sans font, you might remember, he's now starting, together with the team, to think about what could we do different. And he's thinking, let's give people different types of behaviors, different types of beliefs, a different type of philosophy that they can work with and transact with, and make that the cornerstone of the company. And introduces something that is called the GE Beliefs. The 5 things people should be doing in the company. The 5 rules or the things that people are abiding by. And to me, quite frankly, not because I work there, but it's very different to many of these behaviors in a way that I did not have to learn them by heart. I actually thought they made kind of sense. If you think about how you do stuff as a startup or as any organization, it does make sense to do what the customer needs. Because if you're doing something different, your chance of having traction is really limited. That's what I see in a lot of startups I talk to. They're solving amazing problems nobody has. And that's something to think about. Because if you're solving a problem somebody has and somebody is willing to pay for, the chances of you being a viable business is much higher. Stay lean to go fast. Lean startup is in everybody's mouth. GE is embracing lean startup and has been working with Eric Ries. For all of you startup people that have not read the book, highly recommend it. Word of caution, don't just read the book, make sure you understand it as well. There is no points for bullshit bingo and the verbiage. If you can say MVP, that doesn't mean you get it, right? So be really careful on that, because I hear a lot about that as well. Learn and adopt to win means make mistakes and then change, right? Empower and inspire, well, we're not really inspirational. We're doing boring corporate presentations, so I'm working on that one. And then really deliver results. And that's what you want to do, no matter whether you're a startup, small and medium-sized company, or a really huge corporate enterprise. Now with that, it's interesting to say, we figured something out and then we look at what people are doing. This is an example of what people are doing. They had the idea to go out and say, we need a mounting bracket for an aircraft engine. And we don't really know how to build the lightest one, so why don't we just ask everybody? And they crowdsourced this out to everybody together with GrabCAN. And then 1,000 people came back and said, hey, here's an idea of how I would design that. So we ran all these through simulations and whatnot. And there was this guy, I think he was 21 years old, from Indonesia, and conveniently enough, he did not have an aviation background, who redesigned this bracket. 84% lighter than before. In the aviation industry, that is real money. That's big, big dollars. And I have this other friend, Doug Dees, who was into design thinking, and he was wondering, could he change the experience that kids have? Anyone with kids? This is the goosebump moment. Change the experience that kids have going through a CT, which is a really scary medical procedure. Thanks for the nodding, I've been there too. Right? It's really narrow and noisy and whatnot. So Doug redesigned it and it looked like this. It just does not only look like a submarine, but it reduces the fear in kids. It reduces the cost you're having for sedation because you don't need to pay an anesthesiologist to put down the kids. We actually had kids coming off this thing saying, can we go again? Because they're going after the treasure chest on the right-hand side. It's a clinical study that is proving that. So it's really amazing work these people are doing. And then there is the big one. GE decided to go into software, which is why, an increasing frequency, we're now being invited to come to conferences like these. And we've been pondering in this for like 5 years by now. But GE has built a platform based on Cloud Foundry and open standards and microservices, which gets you a huge laugh at developer conferences if you say microservices too often, because people start to hate you. We've ventured into that, and we've built, a platform for that. We've not just built it, we did it wrong, and then we threw it all away, and then, tried again, which cost us more than most. Well, maybe that's where the unicorn comes in, right? Because that's the type of cost that you can sink into this. But now it's working, and it's really, really interesting. So not only does Gandalf cast a spell, he's also going there, and people are trying, and it's a really, really slow change that is happening. But eventually, if this works out, and if we're resilient enough in driving that change, that might help us to reinvent that huge giant and change how things are being done. Change how corporates are acting and act more like startups, not by buying them, because if you buy a startup and you put it into a corporate, they die of organ reject. It's like throwing a handful of fish into a monkey cage, right? You're missing the water. And if you flood the cage, you're drowning the monkeys. So you kind of need a mix out of the two. And as somebody said last night, walk into the venue, there you are. Don't think about the mating process between those two. Okay? Fish, monkeys, really strange. But if it works out over time and we get this evolution going, we might return to the Shire, which is where we started the journey. And if this really works out, and we take these old industrial principles, we'll move them to what I call Principles 4.0. Not managing business outcomes, but customer outcomes. Not at a manageable speed, because that's not the reality of the world we're living in, but really breakneck speed. Stuff that really moves fast. Not stable organizations, but really learning organizations that are constantly evolving and changing and developing as we go. And last but not least, it's not about understanding cost. Because if anything, the balance sheet we have is quite thick, and we can afford a little bit of cost, right? The thing that is much more important is to understand risk. Because that's not something corporates do. That's something a startup usually does. A guy in a startup tries to take every decision he can so he does not miss the boat. A person in corporate tries to avoid every single decision because they're afraid of sinking the boat. That is the new reality. And if that works, the digital transformation happens. And what it does is it radically undoes the work of Taylor. And it gets us back to a much more sane and a much more human environment. All of this is not coincidental because, as I said, we're looking at how does the world work currently, and we're learning from the best. When we try to move, when we sleep, when we're communicating, or when we're consuming. That's not Amazon's new logo, by the way, that's Alibaba. 95% of corporate people are like, oh yeah, last one's Alibaba. Amazon's like, but you got the logo wrong. It's like, no, there's a reason, but I'm not even trying to go there. And if that works, that will change the game, not just for our company, but for any big company. Why I'm particular about GE is because I, as a person, am particular about education, healthcare, and energy, because I believe that those topics will change the world. And I have kids, so I kind of owe them something, and that's why I want to work on those topics, and that's my wish. You know, if people are working on stuff that matters a little more than putting stuff into boxes and shipping it somewhere so they get kind of rich, so they finally make the money they need to buy the stuff they don't need to impress the people they don't like, because that's what we're all after, we could really do something that matters, and that'd be kick-ass. Before we end, because I think I'm coming up on time, I have no idea, I'm like at 15 minutes and 54 seconds still, but I don't want to bore you to death. Right, here is 3 words of warning, and 3 things to consider. That's like the verdict of the talk, okay? When you start this transformation, be aware that it is a journey that you're taking. This is not like, oh, we're doing digital transformation. Done. Right? This is a journey that you do, and the journey is different for everybody, as conveniently highlighted, you know, on the map there. Different people have different journeys. The place you're leaving from most probably feels better than the place you're going to. Remember the Shire and Mordor? That's kind of a difference. But unless you're leaving, you're not making a change. As you're going on to that journey, you'll be facing adversaries every now and then. And they might feel slightly bigger than you. Whoever has seen the movie, you also know there will be sacrifices and there will be loss along the way. Very inconvenient truth. But a truth. That is how stuff happens. Some of them come back. So you can always hope for a comeback if you're just losing your job. Right? Because that really doesn't matter too much. And last but not least, and this is to me maybe one of the most important messages of all, you need diversity in your team. You need people that think different. You need people that see the world with different sets of eyes, from different experiences, from different backgrounds. If it was really after me, quite frankly, I'd love to have a little more women on the picture. It's only one. And not because I want to make a sexist remark, but honestly because I like working with women better than with guys, because they can listen, and they can reflect, and they're much less alpha, which makes making change a lot easier to me. So with that, you know, next time you watch the movie, think about how you want to create a little bit of change, and think about how you see the world. Thanks for your attention. My name is Tim. Work at G.